There are some genres of music that just aren't very well represented in the Rock Hall of Fame. We'll talk about that coming up. Some genres of music just aren't very well represented in the Rock Music Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, there are some genres of music that really have no business being in a Rock Hall of Fame, like country, rap, pop, R&B. Not that there's anything wrong with those types of music, but what are they doing in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Well, today we're going to be talking about progressive rock bands that should be in the Rock Hall. Now, to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, an artist must have released their first commercial album at least 25 years prior to the nomination year, and the music must be considered to have significant influence and impact on the development of rock and roll. The Rock Hall in Cleveland on the Shore Lake area opened to the public in 1995. Well, first up, we're going to talk about Kansas, eligible since 2000, nominated 0 times. Named after their home state, of course. First album came out in 1974, became one of the most popular rock bands both on radio and live shows, toured arenas in the 70s and 80s, Carry On, Wayward Son, Dust in the Wind, Point of No Return. Lots of big hits, lots of big albums. In fact, still currently on their 50th anniversary tour, drummer Phil Ehart and guitarist Rich Williams, only 2 original members still part of the group. And Phil Ehart had a heart attack. Keep him in your prayers. And he had to step down from performing and just become the band's manager earlier this year. But Rich Williams says, you know what? They just don't care about the Rock Hall. He tells UltimateClassicRock.com nobody that he knows really cares about the Hall of Fame, and it doesn't change what they do. Eligible for the Rock Hall since 1996, Emerson, Lake, and Palmer. Just blows my mind they're not already in. 0 nominations. The Works album back in 1977, that's when I first became exposed to them. A friend of mine across the street used to play drums, and believe it or not, he used to like to play drums along with the Works album. Yes, he was a pretty good drummer. The band consisted of Keith Emerson from the Nice on keyboards. You had Greg Lake from King Crimson. We'll get to that later. On vocals, bass guitars, and production. And of course, drummer extraordinaire Carl Palmer. 9 certified gold albums in the U.S., and Greg Lake admitted that groups like ELP were playing stadiums, and he says, hey, that's not something you can overlook and just say, oh, I didn't notice that. Good point. Eligible since 1996, 74-year-old Carl Palmer, the only surviving member of that trio. Emerson took his own life in 2016, and Lake died later that same year from cancer. Their debut album, 1969's In the Court of the Crimson King. Still, I think, one of the coolest album covers ever. Of course, talking about progressive giants King Crimson. Eligible since 1995 and nominated, 0 times. Various incarnations of the band still performing their music live. In March of this year, a new group performing the 1980s King Crimson material was announced, featuring former members Adrian, Belew, and Tony Levin, along with guitarist Steve Vai and drummer Danny Carey. The band is named Beat, if you want to check them out, after the 1982 album of the same name. Now, perhaps the most obscure or least recognized of the bands that we'll mention, British band Gentle Giant. And I recently started listening to their music. They had a following in Europe, remained widely unknown in the U.S. outside of prog rock circles, consisting of multi-instrumentalist Gary Green, Kerry Manier, and brothers Derek Phil and Ray Schulman. The band was only active for 10 years, from 1970 to 1980. An article in FutureRockLegends.com says Gentle Giant will probably never even be nominated because they don't check any of the Rock Hall boxes. Interesting. That is, they were never included in the Rolling Stone magazine top 500 albums or songs. They were never on a Rolling Stone cover, never performed on Saturday Night Live, and they're not in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. And, well, Gentle Giant never won a Grammy. Certainly one of the most baffling omissions from the Rock Hall of Fame, and one mentioned in my last video more than probably any other band as far as who belongs in the Rock Hall of Fame. And they kind of straddle genres, sometimes folky, sometimes heavier, but I consider them progressive rock, and that is Jethro Tull. Since 1994, and 0 times, not even nominated so far. I remember Bungle in the Jungle. That's how they first got my attention with that song on AM radio. Known for great musicianship and sprawling epic compositions, they've been eligible since 94, but do they even want to be in the Rock Hall of Fame? Founder Ian Anderson views it as more of a spotlight for American music. In fact, he's been quoted as saying the institution of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is quite wrong for Jethro Tull, since so many American acts are being ignored and will be for all time. So he says he supposes they just haven't sold enough records or aren't that popular to impress the founding fathers of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Another band that came up in the comments of the last video, and that is Saga. Of course, from Ontario, Canada, progressive rockers. Saga, probably best known in the U.S. for their big 80s MTV blockbuster hit On the Loose. But they've got 22 albums, 22 studio albums out to date. Of course, a lot more live albums and compilations. Brothers Ian and Jim Crichton were the only two band members to play on all those studio records. And eligible since 2004, Saga, still not nominated to be in the Hall of Fame. Now, this is another band I'm a relatively new convert to, thanks to social media and some of the record groups I'm in, and that is Hawkwind. Hawkwind, British band, been around since the 60s, and they've been eligible since 1996. Kind of known as a space rock band, but certainly elements of progressive rock in there as well. Founder Dave Brock has seen dozens of musicians in and out of the ranks of the band over the years, including drummer Ginger Baker, of course, who's already inducted in the Rock Hall of Fame with Cream, and Lemmy Kilmister was one of the early members of the space rock band Hawkwind, and of course he's still waiting to get in. If he does, it will most likely be with his band Motorhead. All right, going to give you just a couple more solo performers known for their association with progressive rock that certainly could be inducted into the Rock Hall of Fame. One of those being Adrian Belew, guitarist extraordinaire, very unique style, and well, you can hear him play with Frank Zappa. He played with King Crimson, of course, and the Talking Heads, as well as lots of great solo albums. A couple of my favorites of his include Lone Rhino and Twang Bar King. Adrian Belew, not in the Rock Hall. And how about Steve Hackett? Now, I believe he is in the Rock Hall as a member of Genesis, but he has released 28 solo albums, including one he released earlier this year, The Circus and the Night Whale. Very good record, worthy of checking out. Well, I'm Mike Lamneck, and thank you for joining us for Music Meanderings. Please subscribe and be sure to comment on who you think, specifically in the progressive rock genre, belongs in the Rock Hall.